Greetings everyone, this is Danny Pang and today I'll be watching a video called The Nightmarchers, the Hawaiian Undead Army by Extra Mythology. Uh, I don't know anything about these Nightmarchers, the Army of the Dead, but I'm very interested in any army that's supernatural military forces, like in the Return of the King, where Aragorn had to
Spoiler.
what? No, that film was in like nearly 20 years ago, and I think if anybody who hasn't watched it is still spoiled by this fact, they deserve to be spoiled. All right. Anyway, yeah, just like in the Lord of the Rings, the Return of the King, Aragorn had to summon the army of the dead from I forgot the name of them to give them a chance to regain their honor, so they would fight for him. Is this an army that fights for a similar cause? Let's find out.
Myths are not stories that are untrue. Rather, they are tales that don't fit neatly into the historical record, which serve as a foundation to a culture. Darkness blankets the Hawaiian island of Oahu, and a lone hiker wanders a forest trail alone. They were separated from their group hours ago, and they've been making their way through the night with only their flashlight to guide them. Surely the path must be around here somewhere. Suddenly, strange sounds pierce the darkness. First drums, then chanting, then a conch shell. As the hiker circles frantically, peering through the trees in search of these noises' source, they hear footsteps behind them, followed by a cry. Their pulse races as they realize what's coming. With no other options, they scramble to the ground and hide in the underbrush, not daring peer out. They hear from a voice close by, and after what feels like an eternity, the noises pass, and all grows quiet and still. The hiker then slowly crawls out of the brush, and marvels at their good fortune, for they have just survived an encounter with the Nightmarchers. Not everyone does. Thanks so much to Audible for helping make today's myth come alive. In ancient Hawaii, processions announcing the approach of great people were commonplace. Such nobles, called ali'i, were believed to be descended from the gods, and also that they possessed a divine power that stemmed from the spiritual energy of their ancestors. They would walk across the islands to check in on their lands, march to battle, and keep up noble appearances. And to give people notice and time to prepare, their guards and heralds would announce their march with drums. This was for the commoners' benefit, for when they heard processions approach, they would have to give way. Because to touch or disrespect an ali'i, even by letting their shadow fall on you, meant immediate death from one of their retainers. And that's where the Nightmarchers come in. A living story tradition that takes place on every Hawaiian island. On certain nights, these spirits of warriors, great leaders, and even the gods themselves emerge and march towards sacred sites and ancient battlegrounds. And you'll know when they're coming, because you'll catch a whiff of volcanic sulfur or rot in the air and feel hot winds pushing grass and tree branches aside to make way for the honored spirits. Dressed for battle in feathered capes and helmets, and armed with spears and clubs, they beat loud drums and blow conch shells to announce their arrival. And it is known that us common mortals must heed this call and make way for them, or else face deadly consequences. For anyone caught even looking upon a night marcher without showing the proper respect or deference will be punished. You might be maimed, you might become deathly ill or drop from a heart attack when a warrior points his spear at your chest. Or most terrifying of all, a bolt of intense light and blistering heat might shoot from the marcher's eyes, incinerating the watcher.
So like Superman. Well, up to this point, it does not sound very realistic and is very supernatural to me. Um, but it is again religious, supernatural versus science. There's no immediate answer to that.
Now, should you hear the Night Marchers, or see a long procession of eerie torches in the night, there's only one thing to do: run as far and as fast as you can. But
I thought you were supposed to hide.
if they're too close and fleeing is out of the question, it's said that your last resort is to strip naked, lie face down, perhaps even defecate on yourself, and don't dare look up. For the night
Ew.
might view this as extreme reverence, or perhaps think you're sick or mentally ill and move on.
Yeah, probably the latter. How is defecating in front of the noble's ghost not an act of disrespect?
However, if you are Hawaiian, you might even have an ancestor in the procession who will recognize and stand over you, calling Nau, or "This is one of mine," keeping you safe from the other marchers. And though the islands themselves have changed over the centuries, the Nightmarchers have not, and are still feared so much that people are told not to mention them after sunset, lest they inadvertently call them. These islanders also planned their buildings carefully, as to not cross the Nightmarchers' path, otherwise your house, school, or strip mall might receive some late-night otherworldly guests. In fact, this knowledge is so prevalent in Hawaii, people avoid living in houses with one door facing the mountains and the other facing the ocean, for it is believed the Nightmarchers will pass through the building rather than go around, which is something many non-native people have learned the hard way over the years, including one famous incident during World War II. Back in the 1940s, the U.S. Army set up an airfield on Oahu and then built barracks on the runway. These barracks faced the sea in front and backed up against a hill, and Japanese-American soldiers recruited in Hawaii lived in these barracks alongside local Hawaiians. One night, a soldier began to toss and turn. The barracks got deathly cold, and a powerful smell filled the room. Then he began to have strange dreams, and all of a sudden, he couldn't breathe. He struggled and gasped, fighting against the hands choking him. But when someone lit a flashlight to see what was going on, he saw nothing but men in their beds. The soldier figured it must have been a night terror and went back to sleep. But it happened again the next night. The strange smell, the chilling cold, and this time, even more soldiers felt hands squeezing around their necks and hearing strange sounds. Someone even reported seeing lights heading toward the beach. But again, no assailant was found. The soldiers of the barracks approached their senior officer, en masse, demanding to be moved to separate housing. But when they explained why, their captain laughed it off. Surely this was some kind of prank or trick to get better housing. Nah, I'm not buying it. But then that night, the captain himself heard the noises outside, and when he came out to check, he was suddenly frozen in place as the smell of sulfur filled the air. Suddenly, he felt an invisible force push him down to the ground and hold him there. His face inches from the earth, he turned his head and looked up as far as he could and saw dozens of pairs of feet
Oh my
floating
god.
past him on the ground.
That is spooky. I was spooked by that animation there. Got chills down my back. And it's noon. I like that. I love a ghost horror story like that.
And only once they had all passed did he feel the pressure lift off his body and was able to run terrified back to his quarters. Now convinced that he personally had experienced something paranormal, the captain sought out an old Hawaiian man who had lived in the area all his life. And the old man explained that the barracks were most assuredly on the path of the Nightmarchers, and advised that they closed the beachside door and opened another door on a different side of the building instead, so it didn't face the mountains. And as soon as they did, the nightly attacks ceased, and the soldiers and their commanding officer gained a new respect for the power of the land. So whether you're on Hawaiian soil, or any other for that matter, please take the time to learn whose land you walk on, who lived and died there, and how to pass through with respect. It's not only the right thing to do, but in a land where ancient warriors still march, it might just save your life. And if you'd like...
Well, that's the end of that video. I really like that video because I am a big fan of ghost and horror stories, and that story was very invigorating to me. Anyway, so it was nothing like the ghost army in the Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, but it was a good story nonetheless. My takeaway from that video was that there are superstitious fairy, well, tales, fables in each land across the world, China, Hawaii, England, America. But I suppose whether the stories were real or not, I think they were there to remind local people and foreigners that they need to respect local traditions and cultures. So they do have their values and they are worth spreading around. Well, anyway, that's the end of that video and this video. So I'll see you guys in the next video.